Welcome to today's Master Coaches Wednesday Weekly Buzz. My name is Bob Bertucci, and I am joined by my fellow Master Coaches, Mick Haley, Fran Flory, and Bill Walton. Sorry for our delay. We had some technical difficulties today, but we think we've gotten it all worked out, and we're ready to roll. Well, it's the 2023 NCAA college season, and weekend one is in the books. Many of the volleyball chat boards are claiming chaos, most upsets ever. Freshman setters need more seasoning. Transfer portal takes effect again. Plus many more reasons and discussions for the results this weekend that we're going to spend some time, discussing and getting into. In addition, right before the season starts, the Pac-12 seems to implode with a sudden and violent explosion of conference realignment. Texas and Oklahoma are off to the SEC next year. 4 teams are added to the Big 12 for 2023. With additional teams from the Pac-12 moving to the Big 12, in 2024. And then, of course, the Pac-4, all right, in 2024, or whatever's going to happen in the next week or two. But one weekend is in the books, and there's quite a lot to talk about. So, with no further ado, we go to Fran Flory, who is our resident SEC expert and legendary coach from LSU. Fran, you got to see LSU and UCLA, the match live and in person. Would you share with the audience what went on this weekend in Baton Rouge, and if you could include your perceptions and predictions of performances you saw in the SEC on this first weekend?
Absolutely. And the LSU UCLA match had everything you would expect in a first match of the year. Sporadic ball control, offenses that have great promise but aren't quite there yet, veterans filling new and expanded roles, freshmen emerging. They split matches. They played Friday and Saturday, each winning in 5 sets. Pretty exciting matches, some really high level and some really first weekend type play. My biggest takeaway from that match was the emergence of Journey Robinson, the freshman from South Carolina on the LSU roster. She proved she can kill balls, she can do it efficiently, and she's going to be a force in the SEC. LSU heads to Omaha this weekend to play at Creighton, so they'll get a little different test. They have Ball State and Northern Iowa also there, so we'll see a little more about the LSU team this weekend as they travel to Omaha. If you ask me about the SEC, I think it was an overall pretty good weekend for the SEC. Florida, probably with the biggest impression, beating Penn State in Tampa, and then went to Stanford last night and beat the Cardinal at Stanford. A huge matchup for them and a great win for Florida. They have a balanced group of returners. They're huge, they're long, they're big, and they have an influx of new talent. Kennedy Martin, another freshman in the SEC, that is leading the way for Florida, and she certainly had a huge impact for them in all of their matches to this point. We'll see what happens with those freshmen as teams kind of put together game plans against them and get some more stats to learn how to defend them.
Fran, how can there be 2 South Carolina kids in our opening presentation here? Martin's a South Carolina kid, 6'6", left side. What's the deal on her?
She's actually Green Bay, Wisconsin, only South Carolina for 1 year.
Well, she's been in 4 different schools in 4 years. Her dad's an NFL football coach.
Yeah, I think that's the journey of a coach's child, right? You go where dad goes, and obviously a legacy of great genetics and great background. But Martin's a real deal. She's 6'6", and she certainly came on and showed that she can be a force right away. I would agree, Mick. What's the deal with 2 South Carolina kids? Pretty unusual, and great to have them both in the SEC from, of course, a biased opinion, right? For me. So interesting. And let's go a little further in the SEC. Kentucky got out the gate slowly, losing to Colorado State at Colorado State. But I honestly think that's a typical start of not losing, but Craig Skinner brings his team along. He's planning for the future. He doesn't want them to be at top performance in the first match of the year. He builds not an unusual start for the Kentucky team. Big matchup coming up Friday against Pitt in Lexington, and then they turn around and play them again in Pittsburgh on Sunday. That's a huge matchup. And, we talked last week about Tennessee, and they just haven't been tested yet. They're athletic. I think they're going to be pretty good. They're going to get a test Thursday at San Diego and then Sunday at Wisconsin. And I would add one more team to this mix that Texas A&M, we just haven't seen much and aren't going to see much of because their preseason schedule, pre-conference schedule is not really going to be tested with top 25 matchups. But Jamie Morrison, let's see what impact he's able to have in the SEC. So it's kind of around the horn at the SEC.
What about Auburn and Arkansas?
I think Arkansas is going to kind of do what they've done all the time, kind of be the stealth bomber from behind and surprise people, although they're not going to be as big a surprise as they have been. They have Taylor Head, Jill Gill. They have some nice arms coming back. They're not as long and physical, so their style of play is going to have to take over, and they're going to have the right matchup as they go through to really move into it. Auburn was the surprise last year. Nobody expected them. Cash on the outside was amazing, and she's got a good supporting cast. They just really haven't been tested yet either. So I think you go pretty deep in the SEC to see some balanced teams, and we'll see where that carries in terms of postseason. And I think it's going to be tough to win the SEC again this year.
Who are you betting on between Wisconsin and Arkansas? They're playing them at home twice.
Well, I think they might get a split because Arkansas speed is going to cause, my opinion, Wisconsin a little bit of trouble because they're fast, dynamic. Their arms are really good, and they have great shot selection. And Wisconsin's physicality, of course, the longer they play, the more the chance the physical team and the longer team is going to be successful. So it'll be a ball control. If Arkansas can stay in system and keep their tempo and speed up, they'll be a good challenge for Wisconsin.
I got one final question for you. Who's the best team in the conference right now?
Well, that's a tough go. I have to say Florida because of the matchups and the success that they've had so far. I think the addition of what they added to their roster, they have good depth on the outside. The question is, do they have enough depth in the middle if something happens? But they have Dixon that transferred from Missouri. They have some great depth on the Pens, and that's going to bode well for them as they go through the season and have some challenges with their current players, their starting lineup.
Kentucky lost, but they're averaging 15 kills per set, more than anybody else in the SEC. Florida's not close to that. They got two freshman left sides. Dixon, you talked about. They lost Beeson, but they don't seem to be worried about that whatsoever. And Stuckey has taken over running the team, right? So
And Stuckey's doing a great job. She did a great job last year, but I think she's matured. She's doing a much better job and has really improved, in my opinion. And so, I think that might be the separation. We'll see. I think in my opinion, Florida is, despite the stats, despite what's happening, I think they're the best team today.
You got a surprise team?
I think A&M could be the surprise team, honestly. They're fired up. They're excited. They have a whole new influx, and they have great talent. So we'll see what happens with them.
Okay.
Well, Houston, back in the Big 12. And Bill, when you started at Houston as a coach 100 years ago, Houston was a member of the Southwest Conference.
Love it.
In 2023, they're in the Big 12. I believe you attended the Southern Cal match this weekend. How about a little feedback on the environment? And Houston.
Yeah, hi. If I was 100 years ago in the Southwest Conference, Mick was 150 because he was there before me.
And Fran was on my team. Fran was on my team.
Three of the four of us are all Southwest Conference members. Yeah, the new Big 12 is actually a combination of the old Southwest Conference and the old Big 8. And Houston opened up this weekend with University of Southern California. They had a pretty good crowd. Over 2,000 people attended, and they were fortunate to defeat University of Southern California 3-1. They've almost got their entire team back from last year, plus the addition of a couple of transfers, outside hitter from Texas Tech and opposite from Mississippi. So they are Houston is probably one of the older teams in terms of the group that's intact. And they showed it with their systems and their defense that they look the most organized of all the teams I watched this weekend. So Houston should be in a pretty good situation. They've got a pretty tough weekend coming up. They're playing Kentucky and somebody else here pretty soon. And we're going to find out if they're for real with their one win over SC, or if SC maybe is a little overrated coming out of the gate. They looked a little unorganized this weekend. The Big 12 had a good weekend overall, with like 6 or 7 teams undefeated in the Big 12. And similar to the SEC. The SEC had, I think, 8 teams undefeated after the first weekend. So the Big 12 and the SEC, I think, were at the end of this weekend, those two conferences had the best conference records out of all the conferences in the country. Normally it's the Big 10 that comes out after the first weekend, but the Big 10 ends up being, I think, the 4th best conference after coming out this weekend. And then, of course, Texas, they went from preseason 1 to number 7 in the country in the Big 12 and their national ranking. And then they go out and play Stanford at Stanford last night and beat them 3-0. Minnesota at Minnesota and beat them 3-0. So I think Texas is just getting organized. I think freshman setters have a lot to do with some of the early losses beginning of the season, getting them to understand what the range and what things they should be doing and who they should be setting in certain situations and what their coaches want. So I think the Big 12's going to be excellent. Two Big 12 schools that didn't have good first weekends was TCU and Baylor. TCU and Baylor played the same 2 teams this weekend in a Big 12, Big 10 conference challenge kind of thing, and they came out of that thing 0-2, but they played 2 pretty good teams. And I think TCU has an excellent chance of really improving. They look really good, even though they lost. And I think based on watching, eye test, as they say, TCU actually looks a little better than Baylor. So even though TCU and Baylor have the same record, I think TCU looks a little stronger out of the gate than Baylor does.
So Bill, how do you account for West Virginia coming in the first weekend and averaging 17 kills per set, followed by Kansas at almost 16 kills per set, and then Iowa State at almost 15.5 kills per set? That's some unbelievable firepower by teams that we didn't even pick in the top 3 or 4 in the conference.
The strength of their schedule early wasn't so great, but their kills per set you can't ignore. That's for sure. I think from watching the whole weekend, a number of games, and of course you can't watch everybody, but from watching a number of games, it certainly seemed like the quality of club volleyball is impacting the quality of Division I volleyball, in terms of teams you didn't consider to be so good looking pretty good with their first and second contacts. And I don't think you got to watch out for complacency, and now more than ever, because it appears that the bottom and the middle is moving closer to the top. And some people want to say that the best teams aren't as good, but I really think after watching this weekend that everybody understands how to win now, and people are using their strategy and their tactics to kind of get into that how do you win mode, and making sure that when they can't attack a ball, they're putting it to the setter. And if you're not so good out of system, you are going to be in for it in the long run if you don't do a good job with that.
Where do you think Central Florida and BYU fit into the mix here?
Central Florida they need to find a new leader, so to speak. You know, they graduated their stud. But BYU is big. I mean, they are big and they are solid. And at home, they are really good, which brings up another interesting point. And I haven't looked at the entire schedule, but the Big 12 is playing their old COVID schedule. Instead of playing everybody home and home, they're playing when Texas plays at Houston, for instance. It's not one match at Houston. Houston gets to play Texas at home twice. BYU, I believe, has to play at Texas twice. So there's not going to be a lot of travel. When you go to play somebody, you have to play them twice when you're at their place. So that's going to kind of have a lot to do with how the schedule is set up, I think, with your ability to win that conference. You're going to have to be good on the road when you play somebody good, because you're going to have to beat them twice on the road. And when you're at home, you got the advantage because you get them at home twice. So the Big 12 conference ought to be pretty good. But BYU is big. They're solid. Their first contact is good. They pursue. They're feisty. I like BYU in the hunt. Unfortunately, they've got to play at Texas twice. Houston is going to make everybody play more games than they want to. They have a way of lengthening the game. They keep the game going. They really make sure that they are going to attack the ball. Running that 6-2, they probably set their right side more than their left side. And they're attacking that ball hard into the 1 and 2 zones all the time, making your setter play more defense than they want to. Houston's going to make your team have to be better out of system than you may want to be.
Can you give me a top five?
In the Big 12?
Yep.
My top 5 are Texas, TCU, Houston, Kansas, and BYU, if I didn't say them twice.
Oh, wow. You probably get a call from coach at BYU real quick.
BYU is in the top 5 for sure. The team that I think is going to struggle to be in the top 5 is Baylor. I know that they were picked to be top 5, but I'm not sure they're going to be top 5. And I think a lot of that has to do with the double scheduling, who you have to play where twice. That's going to
he gets Texas twice. Yeah.
Talking about that's going to be the big difference. Houston gets Texas at home twice. They might be able to get a split out of that deal.
So I was thinking of you and Fran last night when watching the Texas-Minnesota game. And I'll tell you what, you were a middle blocker, and Wircher, am I pronouncing that right? Minnesota left side got stuffed 7 times in that match by the middle, O'Neal, and the right side, Phillips. And I was watching her, and it seemed to me that she was always hitting the ball on the way down. And you know what middles do? You did this better than anybody. The minute the hitter started coming down, you drove your hands across the net and low, because they can't hit up when they're coming down. And she would jump, cock, and then wait till she almost started down before she hit. And that ball, I was afraid was going to damage her. It was coming back faster than it was going out. Fran, on the other hand, as a left side hitter, couldn't block like that because of the length of her arms, but she sure hit line and tool off of that. So did you guys catch that match, and did you see any of that going on? I just thought it was lost on the left side. Both left sides for Minnesota were not good. They were either 0 or minus points for the match.
Well, Nick, I have a theory on that. I think that the system of what everybody's running, high ball, the tempo of people's offense just aren't there yet. I don't know if this left side will actually get a rhythm and not hit on the way down, but I think there's so many changes with people going so quick to the pin and trying to out-quick everybody. And then out of system, you're always going to have to be able to hit that high, really high ball. And some people are setting that thing way high. And so I just don't think the left side attackers, not just for these guys, but across the country, are not very adaptable. And they don't know how to be patient yet, because that's not part of club volleyball. They play in facilities that are high, but nobody in club volleyball sets that super high ball. So adapting to that and having enough reps on that, I think, is a challenge. And I think I saw that in every match I watched this weekend, that the adaptability of outside hitters to different tempos of sets is a real challenge. And it'll be interesting to see who can adjust to that as the season goes on.
I thought Landfair had a particularly struggled last night, but Texas attacked, and they won the serving and the passing game by a huge margin. Minnesota, with the two good left sides, actually were -2 when you take the total scores of points scored and given up. They couldn't score against Texas, and Texas didn't give them a chance. Last week I think I criticized a little bit the freshman setter's location, but boy, was she good, and she just distributed the ball so much better this week. And then her blocking on the right side also was critical. I really felt like Texas owned the match. Landfair got aced 7 times in that match. That can't happen if Minnesota is going to be a top 4 or top 8 team. Watcher, as I said, really got stuffed a bunch of times into the block. That took them out of the whole match there early. And there's a kid that I like from Minnesota that doesn't see the front row, and that's Julia Hansen. I liked her last year, the first 4 or 5 matches, and then Hugh either redshirted her or put her on the bench, and we didn't see her the rest of the season. And now she's playing as a back row specialist, but hitting out of the back row. I think she was 4 for 11 out of the back row last night. Has a really fast arm. Do you guys have any thoughts about her?
Well, she comes in for Grody, the sister who played at Washington, and Grody plays opposite in the front row, and then Hansen comes in and plays middle back and attacks the pipe for him. Going back to your first question about the block, I thought that Minnesota out of system, even if the setter handled the ball, didn't ever go to their back row attack out of system, which is what I think, if I say her name right, Wircher. I think that was the problem. Wircher was struggling with the fact that when they were out of system, they could only set her, even if the setter set the ball, and the block was standing there waiting for her. And it's been my experience watching club kids and a lot of college kids is that the tighter the set is, the more they hit down on the ball. It's like, if it's tight, I'm going to try and bury it. But the tighter you are, obviously, the more in danger you are of being blocked. So I think that the college girls will take them a while to learn not to swing down into the block. And if you're hitting on the way down and you're trying to hit the ball straight down, you're really in trouble. The other problem is that Wircher, I think, is a little stressed by the number of balls she has to hit out of system to carry the team, especially after they get to 20. Minnesota was right there with a like 23-22 swing by Worcestershire that she just blasted straight out of bounds going for high hands. And that really put Texas in the driver's seat in that final set, with Worcester stuck in the front row and serving Landfair in the back row. It'll be interesting to see if he sticks with Landfair passing as he goes through the season, or if he starts to make tactical adjustments to change the passing. But I think I had an assistant from China who worked with me, and he was always like, should we coach in September so that we have a good team in November, or should we coach to win in September? And I think that that's what coaches have to kind of decide. Do I win in September, or do I win in November? And the other question is, and I don't know how to handle this in this format, but something to think about going forward, how many coaches are coaching to also manage the chance of losing somebody into the portal that I don't let play enough? And I don't know we don't know what deals are struck, or when I recruit somebody out of the portal, how I ask them to play. But, Landfair wants to play on the national team. She wants to be an outside hitter. Well, she could end up like Catherine Plummer, not getting any playing time on the national team because she's not a good passer. So how much does he let her go? And it's not just that she got aced. Even when she passed, a lot of her balls were, 10, 11, 12-foot line, just get it up in the middle of the court so you can get a swing. But they don't have Samaday swinging out of the back row when they're out of system. And so since they don't have anybody to take out the garbage, and Worcestershire has to take out the garbage, Minnesota is going to kind of be up and down until they can figure all that out. But yeah, I have to agree with you, Mick. I think that college players have to learn how to see the block and attack the edges of the block, not just the top, but the right and left edges. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to hit off the block, and they're not very adept at it. Georgia Tech had one of the best ones, the Brazilian girl, and you'd watch her swing, and sometimes you think that's kind of a strange looking arm swing, but it's an arm swing meant to hit the ball off the block, not to hit the ball straight down. And that's how she scored a bunch. And, our kids just don't come up learning to hit that because they don't play against older players. They don't learn how to survive with a big block in front of them. All these college girls were the best players on their club team hitting against a 5'8" right side setter or running an offense where they got a lot of open swings, and, they could just blast away because they overpowered athletically. But now suddenly I'm matched up against somebody bigger than me. And can I handle that? And
Fran, did you see the match?
I did not see the match.
Well, Mick, I saw the match, and I'd have to agree with you that Texas's serving and passing was clearly superior to Minnesota's in that match. And I think my understanding is O'Neill didn't play the first weekend.
That's right.
Not to take anything away from Long Beach State. I think the coaches punished Texas in the poll, but maybe didn't give Long Beach State enough credit for their success.
Right.
But the X factor is definitely O'Neill. I mean, when she blocked, I think it was the first game, she already had 5 blocks in the first game of the match. I mean, she was playing incredibly. And it's somebody, you just can't hit down against her because she is getting over the net. And I thought both teams did a tremendous job above the net with their hands blocking. I mean, always finishing the block, always penetrating and turning the hand in. I thought it was a great match to watch, from the athleticism. The next thing I would say, and I'm waiting for this to happen because, coaching men the last 4 or 5 years, it gives you a little different perspective after doing so many years with the women's game. But the women's game is starting to look, especially with the lower net, it's looking just like the men's game. I mean, the women are so athletic, and they're playing so high above the net. It's great to watch. And offensively, I really think that now what we need to have is a little bit of old school in with the new school. It doesn't have to be always just fast. I mean, you could be running combinations, with the front row or with the back row. All right, that could be very effective right now in the game, and no one's doing that. Everything is pretty straightforward. So I think we're talking about Wisconsin. I want to jump into the Big Ten a little bit. It's unusual that the Big Ten isn't the top conference in overall wins and losses, going into the first few weeks of the season. I think the middle and the bottom of the conference seems to be a little weaker than normal. Just watching some of those matches. I mean, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Nebraska appear to be on the top, right now, early. Penn State, Ohio State kind of in the middle of the pack. I mean, Ohio State, of course, lost 5 starters from last year. So she had 2 wins this weekend. And I think very smart scheduling because it was mid-majors. It was teams she should have played and gave her team a chance to start to feel themselves after losing, so many players. Penn State, on the other hand, had 2 losses. It was a bad start for them, but 2 tough matches on the road. So you really don't know how they're gonna develop as the season goes on, because they really challenged themselves a lot, this first weekend. So it's pretty early to predict, what's going to happen. But I thought other things in the Big Ten that were interesting. I thought Rutgers had a great start for Rutgers. I mean, they had a big win against Virginia. That was very important for them, off the start. And I think, she's also scheduled pretty well, to at least, stay competitive. It'll be different once they get into conference play. Michigan, on the other hand, losing to BC, that's a bad loss for Michigan. It's a great win though for BC, and I think that's a team that you need to look at down the road. And I'll let you talk about the ACC in just a minute. The Illinois and Indiana, they had a good start, but they were matches that, for mid-majors in state that they probably should win. Nebraska, of course, with volleyball day in Nebraska, today, I'm sure he's scheduled, with that in mind. So being 3-0 doesn't really tell us too much right now, other than we know Nebraska has got some talent on that team. And the other team that I thought had a rough start was Purdue, who traditionally is very strong, even in the beginning of the season. Suffering 2 losses against teams that they would normally beat puts a big question mark, in Dave's mind right now. And what does he have to do here quickly to turn some things around?
Do we have suggestions for what Dave should do?
Well,
I do. How about you guys? Fran, did you watch, or Bill, did you get to watch Purdue?
And they get to play Houston here next weekend. And Houston's playing Kentucky and Purdue, so at a tournament. And the interesting thing is that Purdue scheduled it. They're hosting the tournament. Purdue scheduled the tournament. They're playing Houston the first night. And the second night, the winners play and the losers play. It's an old traditional tournament format. Well, I think the reason that Purdue scheduled Houston was I think they thought, well, we'll win that one and Kentucky will win theirs and we'll play Kentucky on the final night. But I think that there's an excellent possibility that we'll see in the final match on Saturday night, which should be the Purdue match. We'll see Purdue in the consolation and we'll see Kentucky and Houston in the final. Unfortunately.
That would disappoint the Ball State boys, because Skinner and Dave both went to the same high school, played together at Ball State, and they will go for the juggler if they get a chance, but they both have to finish the first night. I watched Purdue a great deal. I love Hudson. I was giving Dave a hard time about Hudson trying to hit the ball through people. First thing she did in the matches is she came out and tried to snap line, and that's exactly a shot that she needs to master to open up that cross-court shot she's got and the velocity she's got. But I don't think the outside hitters are the problem. I think Purdue's defense is not at the level that they've played in the past, and that starts at the net, and that's really with the middle blocking. I thought the middle blocking was porous, and I don't mean to misspeak. I thought the ball went through the blocker's hands, outside the blocker's hands, under the blocker's hands. I just felt that the middle blockers weren't in tune with the rhythm of the game. And I think he'll be working on that all this week, because if he can fix that, he's got point scoring and he can get back in the hunt. But I really feel like it's got to be defense at the net first, and then the backcourt to where they can get the ball to the kids with the arms, because they can swing. That's my take on Purdue.
I think another thing that we want to just address is Michigan. Erin's been doing double duty. All right, she's been running out, working with the national team overseas and running back and taking care of her team, not making excuses. I don't know how she's doing it. It's quite a challenge.
Well, she's not. She lost to Western Michigan last night. I mean, think about this. Michigan's losing to Western Michigan. Michigan State's losing to MAC teams. The whole state of Michigan's a disaster at the Big Ten level right now.
Well, at the Big Ten level, but maybe Western Michigan's pretty good. They beaten Western Kentucky, I think it was also. So, they're playing pretty good volleyball right now. Again, not to take anything away from, the team that has success, because we've seen that happening in the coaches poll.
I think Aaron would agree Michigan's bad right now.
Well, I think she's doing the national team and getting ready for this qualifying event in Poland is probably a very difficult thing for her to try to manage both things. And I think that might start to, take care of itself as the season goes on. I hope.
It comes though, the question comes to mind, and people don't like to say this, and I'm sorry, but I'm just going to say it. Is it fair to the athletes to have the coaches not be given 100% of their time to the program? I know that we want to have great national teams, and incidentally, after watching this weekend, the left side arms that are coming up, I don't think Karch is going to have any trouble finding point scores by 28. We have got some of the best arms I have ever seen in the game, and the velocity. Skinner hit a ball last night that was unbelievable, but I tell you what, Martin hit some balls that were just rockets, and there are several Martins out there. There's another one at Creighton that's just annihilating the ball, and we thought Sis was good, and this kid's even better, I think. So I think we have left side arms coming in great quantities to the national team. But I worry about coaches being gone and not managing their programs, especially when they're redeveloping. If I'm an athletic director, I guess I signed off on this, but it's really hard for the kids because they don't want to get beat up on, and there's a certain level of expectation at their school. So I'm sure John Spraw's been faced with this. He went 7 or 8 years without winning a national championship at UCLA. Finally got the monkey off his back this spring with the championship. And Al Skates is sitting over there with 12 or 13 rings. We're looking at him like, when you gonna start doing this? So, it's just something you have to throw out, and I hope they can get it fixed real quick.
Well, Mick, I would take the other side as well from the coaching perspective. Getting a chance to go coach in the Olympics as an assistant, that's a lifelong dream for many. So is it fair that they have to set that aside as a coaches group? We talk about protecting the student athletes quite a bit in the world today. And at some point, we got to protect also the coaches every day. So at some point, I don't find any fault in what Alfie and Aaron are doing, because this is a dream of theirs. This is what they've worked for. And yes, their programs, it'll cost their programs at the beginning or maybe at different points. And certainly those kids that are in the program, you're right, they're not getting 100%, but they got great staffs, and their staff can pick up a lot, not everything from a head coach. We all know and respect that. But I actually think it's a really good thing that they're doing it. And I think it's great their administration's allowing that. Because as you recall, we've been in some different shoes with that in the past, and not allowed to do that. And so I think it's a great thing. And as a player, I would be thrilled that my coach was going to be coaching the Olympics.
Well, from the coach's standpoint, I totally agree with you.
Well, Mick, why don't we turn it over to you to talk a little bit about the Pac-12? I know you have some intimate knowledge of the Pac-12, and maybe you'll share a little bit of that with us.
Boy, I don't know, guys. This is kind of the worst start of a Pac-12 that I've ever seen. I liked watching Stanford last night. Oregon is good, and I think Washington State's good. And we got 9 other teams that I don't know what's going on. They've got a lot of work to do. Now, Arizona State is 3-0 after this weekend, but the quality of teams they're playing is mid-level at best. Washington's 2-1, but had a bad loss and didn't schedule very high. Oregon State seems to be struggling. Cal has got good numbers for kills per set, but again, had a loss to Connecticut State, Central Connecticut State. Sorry, Colorado just looks like they're not prepared, and I think UCLA is a comer. Fran mentioned that UCLA is a comer. I thought in the second match against LSU, they really started to get some rhythm. They really started to swing, and and they really boat raced that fifth set in the second night. They did a really good job there. I don't know what's going on at Utah. They seem to be okay, but not climbing. I thought USC losing to Houston and Rice, with the homecoming of Skylar Fields coming home to Houston and only hitting about 115, maybe points out that they can't score. And if they can't score, they're not going to win. And maybe we'll miss the tournament, depending. I was looking at Stanford, Oregon, Washington State is the top three. Utah, maybe USC, Arizona State. Arizona had 2 losses to Davis and UNC, so they have a new coach. So maybe they'll get straightened out. But going down the line there, it just doesn't look exciting. And I don't know how they're going to turn this around. I'd be excited if they could, but I just don't see the athletes in the Pac-12 right now. And if this is the last year for the Pac-12, which we don't know, because one of the presidents of the 4 teams that are still in the conference for next year is taking a leadership, and it's not Stanford, unfortunately, and really trying to resurrect the Pac-12 with either a merger of another conference or getting more teams to jump ship and join the Pac-12. They feel like they have a better chance into the football championships if they can keep an 8-team conference floating under the Pac-12 banner. I don't know if that's right, but the volleyball has got 3 teams that are going to challenge in the top 20, I believe. Stanford, Oregon, and Washington State. And then after that, maybe UCLA gets up there. Maybe Arizona State's good. We just don't know yet. And maybe Utah catches fire, but Utah lost to Utah Valley last weekend. So another local showdown that didn't work out well for the Pac-12 teams. So I think it's interesting. Stanford has 15.3 kills per set. Washington State 14.9 kills per set. Oregon 14.8 kills per set. Those 3 are way up in kills per set, so they're going to be able to score the ball. Cal is 4th in 14.2 kills per set, but hasn't played a strong schedule yet. So we need to see if that's a real stat or just something that's happened the first weekend. So that's how I see the Pac-12. You guys have any questions for me on these guys?
Mick, what about the 4 teams going to the Big 12 next year?
What about them?
Does it make the Big 12 stronger in the future, or does it just make more travel?
No, I think it makes the Big 12 stronger. I think UCLA will rise up to the competition. USC will one way or the other rise up to the competition because their whole school will demand that they do that.
That's Big 10. Okay. That's Big 10. Yeah. But what about Big 12? What about Arizona, Arizona State, Utah, and Colorado?
Well, I think Arizona State will function really well. I think Utah will function really well. Colorado and Arizona have to decide if they're going to kick it up. I'll tell you what, the Big 12, in my opinion, and Bill, you reported on this, but they could get 8 teams into the tournament this year. They are good in the middle of the pack. I mean, they are good like from 15 to 25. Their teams are going to be high-powered teams, and they get a chance to play the Texases and BYUs and those teams. And there's a lot of hungry coaches in that conference. So we didn't talk about Kansas State, for instance, but they just walloped people this weekend. They have a new coach out there, and he's going to play against his brother for 1 year at Oklahoma. So it'll be interesting to see that rivalry. That'll be fun too. But the way I see the Pac-12, that's kind of where they are this year. And then when they split up, I think they add the teams that are leaving add to the 2 conferences they're going to. I don't think they're a drag in any way, shape, or form. You want to talk about the ACC?
Yeah, let's go ahead, Mick, and talk about the ACC. And how they did this weekend. I mean, Florida State and Duke had victories. We talked about Virginia having a big loss to Rutgers, but Boston College having.
Yeah, I got to ask you about that. Where's Virginia ranked, Bob?
Well, they're just in the middle of the pack.
Yeah, well, I know. So why is that
Rutgers is in the bottom of the pack. So if they have a win against anybody that's in a Power 5 conference, I think that's great.
All right, I that's an East Coast bias here. I just see it.
I know you're giving me some crap, but I got to stand up for a team when they do a good job, and they did.
Okay, all right.
She was my assistant coach for a couple of years and did a great job for me. So I was pretty happy about how well she did.
Well, I'll let you off the hook on that one because I do think Virginia would like to have a good program, and they've had some setbacks in the past, and I think they've got to go in the right direction. Certainly, a great academic school, so we'd like to see them hustling. But hey, the ACC has 15 teams, you guys, and they're talking about adding Stanford, Cal, and SMU. How would you like to be in a conference with 18 teams? And not only that, right now the conference top 5 or 6 are pretty darn good. Louisville, same old, same old. They're coming on, and they pick up the kid from UCLA in the transfer portal. Sutter seems to be adequate. De Beer looks healthy. They're big in the middle, 6'6" in the middle. They got great support, so they'll be back in the hunt. Pittsburgh, I think he'll get that straightened out. I don't know if he's trying to play a 5-1 or he's messing around. He's always managing in the early parts of the season. He's not really playing to win yet. Once he gets it figured out with his kids, then he's going to go after Louisville. He's going to go after Georgia Tech. And hey, Michelle came back with some athletes. I thought, wow, she had a good group, but she lost the kingpin, and she came back with 3 or 4 athletes that just hit the cover off the ball. So I don't think Georgia Tech has taken a step down. They're probably third in that conference again, but they're maybe even a closer third than they were before. I think they have a chance to win some of those home matches. Hard to win on the road against Pitt and Louisville, but they could do that. You mentioned Jason Kennedy up at Boston College. He's been there 6 years. This is his 6th year. He won the invitational tournament last year, didn't get into the NC2As, went into the other tournament, won that tournament. He's got his kids in system. They look like they can play. They could be a good mid team, maybe 5th in the conference. That's one to watch out for. Another one to watch out for that we haven't heard about in a couple of years is Florida State. They look very surprising to me. They've got numbers, they've got arms. They haven't played top level teams. They're going to play Florida here pretty soon. That's actually going to be a battle this year. That match is well worth watching, I think.
What about Miami?
Yeah, Miami I watched the other night, actually. I wanted to see about them. They have some young kids that have some talent. They can score the ball. They don't look like they're in the system yet. They don't look like they flow yet. They got behind. They had to come back to win the other night that I watched against the FIU. But FIU wasn't bad. FIU was pretty competitive, and this was at Miami. So I'm not too high on Miami yet. I think they have to beat some people before I can get excited about them. But I think they have a chance. North Carolina State, I thought, should be good this year. Don't know yet if they will be. They had a loss to Utah, and it was a 3-0 loss. I was thinking they should take a set if they're going to challenge there. So I don't know. Notre Dame does. They played out at Tech. I watched that match. They just don't look like they've got enough athletes to really challenge in the conference. They went 1-1 at Tech at that tournament. Wake Forest is got good numbers right now. They've been down for a while. I saw them. Couldn't tell if they were going to be good. Just need to see more. Syracuse looks like they're number 15. They don't look like they're ready to compete at all this year. And I'm sorry to see that because Leonard had such a good program out there for a number of years, and Syracuse was always in the hunt for 4th or 5th in the conference. And the other one is North Carolina. They lost to Davis, I believe. One of the two. They either beat Arizona. Oh, I think they beat Arizona and lost to Davis, and that to me is a wash. I don't see that they've shown much improvement yet. So that whole conference to me looks like, oh, and Duke had Duke loses 2 games. I didn't realize this when Duke had that big win down there, and help me, they beat Purdue in 5, and it was like everybody was getting kills and nobody was playing any defense. Duke was really good in that match, and guess what? They're 1-2 for the weekend. A win over Purdue. They lose to Loyola of Chicago.
Well, Mick, we addressed that a little bit when we talked off camera.
I think I'm wrong about that. I think they beat Creighton and lost to Purdue. They lost 3-0 to Purdue, beat Creighton in a great match. So, yeah, we did talk about that.
Well, Mick, there are 11 teams in the ACC getting 16 or more kills per set. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah. Yeah, even Bob couldn't do that.
Well, we talked about another thing off camera. I think it's worth mentioning to the audience is, now that the COVID, 6th-year players are kind of filtering out, and we don't have as many older players. I think we're going to have these matches where, like, a Long Beach State's going to come in and upset a Texas, and then the next night they're going to lose to Podunk U, because the emotions of the younger athletes, especially it's early in the season, till they get used to being able to handle those ups and downs. I mean, we've all coached. We've seen a team one day look tremendous, and the next day it's like, where'd that team come from?
Well, there's a good example of that last night. Rice, who beat USC this weekend, turned around and played at home last night against the University of Louisiana Lafayette and lost 3-0 at home to Louisiana. And Fran, the whole Sun Belt Conference is taking a big rise. They've added sand volleyball. Their coaches are all young and they're recruiting like mad. They're into the portal. Almost all of their teams have been improved. I thought Louisiana played a nice style of play last night. Took Rice right out of their game because they obviously didn't prepare for that kind of intensity, and Louisiana got them. So pay attention to the Sun Belt teams, but that's just a great example of what you're talking about.
Well, I was going to say, Bob, excuse me, not just the Sun Belt. What about the Big East?
Well, that's what I was just going to talk about, the Big East.
Yeah, who is out there?
Them a little bit. Well, Mick, you remember St. John's. You played them in the Elite Eight. Well, St. John's beat Ole Miss this past weekend and Arizona State. That's 2 big wins for St. John's, so it looks like their program's, on the rise. Marquette, lost to Western Kentucky. I struggled with Dayton. That's questionable. Maybe that was where I saw the Western Kentucky again.
I think Dayton's pretty good, though. I watched Dayton play. I like Dayton. Yeah.
And Marquette seems to be back a little bit too.
They don't have the precise offense that they had last year. I saw them in the regionals at Austin play, and I liked Marquette, but they're not at that level yet this year. He's got some work to do.
Well, I think Marquette's libero transferring to Cincinnati hurts them because their bro is at Cincinnati from last year, and they're working through that. I think that's going to be a kind of a work in progress for them.
But even though Creighton lost, Bob, I think Creighton has got some of the best arms that they've ever had, and I thought their defense in the match that I watched that they won, I thought their defense was outstanding, and those 2 left sides just pounded the ball. So I'm back on Creighton's bandwagon. I was really going to say to them, well, every year you're close, but you never get. I say this to Washington State too, and they all get after me. But I sure like to see those 2 programs come through, not just play close and close and close, but let's break through and let's beat some teams in the tournament.
Well, in the Mountain West, since you brought that kind of up indirectly, the Mountain West could end up being the new Pac-10.
It sure could. And guess what? Maybe the best setter in the country might be at Colorado State. You have to see this kid. She runs the show like I've never seen. I have her name here, Emery Herman. Actually, she beat me.
They actually beat Kentucky.
Yeah, and they beat me this summer. The Mountain West All-Stars played in Croatia with that team that I was coaching in Croatia, and this kid just ran my team right out of the gym, making great selections. Location is absolutely perfect. I stopped her afterwards and I said, "Where are you from?" She says, "Georgetown, Texas." I said, "Oh, really? Who trained you?" She says, "Nobody's ever trained me. I just kind of watch and pick things up." She's old school and she is really good. Reminds me of the Rice setter last year that I liked so much. But this kid, if you get a chance to see Colorado State, make sure you pay attention to the setter, Emery Herman. She's really good.
Yeah, they unfortunately lost 2 other matches after that win against Kentucky, but one of them was against Stanford. They went 1-3 against Stanford. And that tells you
they should have beat Stanford. Come on.
Well, in that Mountain West, we also have UNLV, beating Colorado 3-1.
Yeah, that doesn't say very.
Wyoming is 3-0 right now.
Yeah. I'm worried for Colorado. UNLV is not very good right now. I got to see them a little bit too, and they may get better, but Colorado should be better, folks. I don't know what's going on there.
Well, another conference we want to just touch on real quick might be the West Coast Conference. Santa Clara, is 4-0 right now, and they actually have a pretty good schedule. Pretty interesting. They're actually going out to the east and the southeast and playing some matches. So they're actually going out. I'm sure they're trying to position themselves so they get an at-large bid, if not, win their conference. St. Mary's, on the other hand, is 3-0, but they're only staying on the West Coast. I thought that was interesting. Pepperdine has a rough start with 2-0, but they're playing a really tough schedule. And San Diego has a pretty tough schedule in the West Coast Conference, but they're also 3-0. So those 2 teams that are traditionally strong programs are kind of in the bottom of their conference right now. But I think that might have something to do with the scheduling.
I think the LMU is going to challenge USD for first place in that conference. You didn't mention LMU, but they're the ones that beat Long Beach after Long Beach beat Texas. I think LMU is going to be in the hunt.
Do you think they get a Final Four team out of that conference again?
No way. The other teams are, I'm sorry, but the other teams are too good. They're just too good. These teams are good. They're playing at a high level. They'll get better during the season. Their conference is quite competitive, but they're not Final Four teams.
Well, college volleyball is not the only volleyball happening right now. Our national teams are getting ready to attempt to qualify for the 2024 Olympics in Paris, France. So, Bill, why don't you give us a snapshot of what's going on with that qualifying event to kind of finish out our show today?
Yeah, so September 16th through 24th is the International Olympic Qualifying Tournaments. There's 3 of them, 24 teams, 8 teams per site. And just without covering all the teams, the U.S. is with Poland, Italy, USA, Germany, Thailand, Colombia, South Korea, and Slovenia. That's our pool. If you finish first or second in the pool, so you figure you've got 6 matches over 8 days, and that's a lot of volleyball. Our national team, the group that I think that they're taking to Poland, is playing in Norsekas right now, getting themselves polished up for the September 16th date. You have to finish first or second in your pool to get one of the 6 spots that will qualify from these tournaments. The old qualification system's out, and there's a new qualification system. the host countries in. First and second place from these 3 pools are the 6, so that gives you 7. And then the other 5 teams will be the highest ranked teams at the end of the VNL next year. And there's a website if you want to figure out how the points work. You can go and goof around with what tournaments and how many points you have to get per tournament to finish ranked. So right now, the U.S. needs to win or take second in the qualifying tournament this September 16th through 24. And that's where Elfie and Aaron will be missing those dates. They fly out like 3 days before, and I don't know how much practice they're going to attend, but there's going to be probably 2 weeks of practice before they leave. So Aaron and Elfie will be missing some part of their college seasons to take the team to the International Olympic qualifying tournament.
So Bill, can I ask a question about this? The 5 teams at the end won't be the highest ranked teams. They'll come from teams that are ranked, and the FIVB is going to be able to select them, which is different than a point system. Is that correct?
The way it will work is there'll be the teams are ranked like 1 through 88, and the 7 teams that are qualified for the Olympics after this September move out of that group, and then they take the next 5 highest ranked teams. The FIVB is attempting to get the 12 best teams in the world, or the 11 best teams plus the host in the world, to be in the Olympics. That's the goal.
But my point was the teams are not going to get these spots by earning points. They're only going to earn enough points to get into the ranked area, and then the FIVB will select them. So there's going to be a lot of moving around, and if you want to be guaranteed, you want to be one of these top 7 teams.
Right. Well, because what's going to happen, if people aren't aware, the tournaments you're playing in are weighted. Some tournaments you get more points, some tournaments you get less points for your ranking. Then the other thing that's going to happen in next year's VNL, say, Mick, your team is already in the Olympics and my team's not, but we've got to finish high enough in VNL to get enough ranking points to make it. But you know that you don't want to play me in the Olympics. So you might bag it against a couple teams that you'd rather make into the Olympics, and then you play the teams that you don't want in the Olympics. You play them hard to give them losses when they play you, but you give the other teams wins. So
never did that before.
But yeah, internationally, you see teams doing that to try and infect the Olympics with a less capable group so that you don't end up playing too many strong teams in the Olympics if you're already in. But yeah, you're right. The U.S. needs to finish first or second, and they're in a really tough pool because Italy's got their opposite back. Poland's got a huge opposite. Slovenia is just doing pretty good in the CEV, so it's going to be a dogfight for the U.S. to finich second. And the U.S. has Larson back for this, so we'll see how that works out.
Slovenia is a crap match. They have an Italian coach that has been bringing these kids along for 2 years, and I had a chance to see some of the kids he's working with, and he's kept them under wraps. They're pretty good. Whether they can beat U.S., I don't know, but I hope the U.S. takes them seriously.
Yeah. So if you want, you go to the website, International Olympic Qualifying Tournament, and at that website there is times, Central Eastern European Standard Times, and the matches and who everybody's playing. So it's an 8-day tournament, so it's fast, and we'll know at the end of the 8 days if we're qualified for the Olympics or not.
All right, Bill. Well, thank you very much for giving us a heads up and a rundown on the international game. I'd also like to take a minute to thank our audience. I know we went a little overtime today, but there was a lot to cover when you were looking at all these conferences and all the upsets and things that were going on. And I hope that everybody feels like they've, taken something from the show that might help them moving forward. Going into next week, I mean, there's a lot for us to talk about next week. Of course, Volleyball Day in Nebraska. We hope to get maybe one of the coaches that were involved in that event on just to hear what they had to say about their experience, during the day. Of course, that's going on today and tonight in Nebraska, where we're going to see Nebraska play Omaha at possibly a 90,000 fans in their football stadium.
What's the weather report, Bob?
Yeah, the weather report is sunny and beautiful out. That's what we're hoping for. We also can cover a couple other things that are real important. The pro league, the lineup of teams, players, all right, or the conference realignment. So, tune in next week. We're sure to have a great show and make it as informative as possible.